So, as we talk about companies, open source program offices are organizations or small groups within companies in different departments, depending on the company and the size of the company and the focus of the company. Everyone has a little bit of a different approach, how to create an OSPO, or some companies call them open program offices because it's not always about the source code. I mentioned AI before, for example, how to approach AI and the use of AI. Sometimes that is coupled together with the approach toward free and open source software. So in that regard, having an OSPO is very important. However, when companies need to cut costs, then OSPOs and some of the open source engagement related roles and groups are the first to reduce or fully eliminate. So, in this upcoming segment, Wolfgang Gehring talks about why your company should have an OSPO if it doesn't have it yet, and when should you have it? Right now. I think I catched you referring to OSPO level at one point. Does that mean that your company has an OSPO as open source program office or inner source program office? So you have like a central organization who deals with open source in a more coordinated, strategic way?
Absolutely. So, I mean, to make it slightly more complicated, so at Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation, we have an proper OSPO, properly named Open Source Program Office, that takes care of that. And then at the group level, we have the FOSS Center of Competence, which basically is the same. It just has a different title, yeah. But that's where we get together regularly, so at least once a week, and talk about strategic stuff with regards to open source. And so at the group level, we have all the concerned parties. We have the IT and the R&D department with the car IT people and the legal department, and some subsidiaries and stuff. Yes, so absolutely. And we've had that FOSS Center of Competence from the beginning of our open source endeavors. And I think it's really important, so now at our subsidiary MBTI, for short, Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation MBTI, okay. We founded, we had a group before, but now we founded a proper OSPO a couple of years ago. And I think it's very helpful. And I mean, in my opinion, if you're serious about open source at your company, you need an OSPO, whether you name it OSPO or COC or whatever, but otherwise you're not making full use of the potential of open source. Again, if somebody in the company here and somebody in the company over there does something with FOSS, and you're not talking to each other, then you're not doing it in a concerted fashion, and you're also not mitigating all the risks, and you're not going towards basically one direction. And so I think that's very much needed. Absolutely.
So for you, it worked out well to even like from the starting point have like a center organization who is responsible for both figuring things out as well as I assume sharing all that with the rest of the company. Well, as much as you can, because we just established that when you have a large company to share news with people, it doesn't always carry to every single person right away. So it takes time for the news to trickle down. But you say that it is kind of a game changer and the way to go to have a central organization.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I mean, we talk to many people, and sometimes there is a person or maybe two people who are like you, ambassadors for open source and inner source in a way, but the company doesn't always have the central organization who these people would be either part of or interacting with. Another example that we saw is like the OSPO being more tied to marketing budget and the marketing department, which doesn't always seem to be working out well. But it sounds like that in case of Mercedes-Benz, you really strongly tie that to technology and R&D and like not just one portion of the company, and even that being marketing, which doesn't really have that much influence over engineering, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen in different companies, literally different organizations, drastically different organizations hosting OSPOs, as well as how high up or how low and embedded inside of the company they are. Like at Hewlett Packard, back in the early 2000s, I formed their open source program office, and we actually started in the server division because that's where Linux was, and that's what we did. And then we moved to the CTO office, and then we had this joint relationship between the CTO office and the legal department, right? And then I've seen other organizations where it's just under the legal, or others where it's just under the CTO, or sometimes it does stay just within a business. So I've always found that interesting, right? It's like the OSPOs and the centers of competence. They, as you say, the general job description is very similar for that type of organization across different companies. But where they're housed has always been, yeah, they seem to be all kinds of different places.
Yes, I have, talking to OSPOs from other companies, I have made the same experience. I've seen them located in all kinds and parts of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always love when people share their experiences on the podcast because the point really isn't us telling you that you have to have an OSPO, but really diving into the why and how an OSPO can help and how people have been going through the process of creating one, experiencing what it can do and how it can do it. And then once having that experience, then realizing that is one of the very important parts and groups of the organization, especially at a company with the size and history of Mercedes-Benz.